Hi, welcome to the Central and North London branch library videos of the BCS. My name is Dan. You can see my details there on screen, and also my email, which is at the bottom. If you have any comments relating to this presentation or to others in this library, please email me and let me know. Likewise, do email if you would like to do a presentation in this series. It must be non-commercial, 15 minutes in length approximately, and must be of reasonable quality. We can make sure of that because we can work. Just let me know and we'll go for that. I am going to introduce you today to two exciting presenters. They are Stav, whose details you'll see in just a moment, and Daniel. They will introduce themselves, but I just want to say that this is one of our Ciso fireside talks. So please make sure you've got your fire nice and warm and ready, and let's go. Over to you, Stan.
Thank you so much, Darim. Pleasure for hosting us. Thank you for hosting us. So this is the first session of our new panel of Ciso fireside talks. And I thought that it can be really great to have Daniel Liber as our first panelist. So Daniel and I will be working together for a while, and Daniel has an amazing experience in the cybersecurity field. You can see Daniel's credentials here. So without further ado, Daniel, it's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. And can you tell us a bit about your professional background?
Of course. Well, first of all, that's a picture of me before becoming head of information security, as you can see, less stressed. So I have been working in the information security for about 15 years. I started off in the Israeli Defense Forces as a security researcher. Currently, I'm the head of information security at Playtech, which we'll explain about soon. And the team is about 35 security engineers in different teams. I used to work before that as security architect and product security lead in companies such as MDocs and CyberArk, which are software and telecom companies in Israel. I also worked as a security consultant for several years in ComSec, which is the biggest consulting companies in Israel when I worked there. And I also spoke in some conferences, mostly in OS and BSITE, since I grew mostly in the application security domain.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So can you tell us a bit about Playtech for those of us that don't really know Playtech, never heard about the company, but will have a bit of a background about what the company does?
Of course. So Playtech is about 20 years old. It was established in 1999 in Estonia, and it is a leading software platform provider, mostly providing its platform in the online casino and online gaming domains. It also has a retail machine branch. And what's unique about Playtech or any other company which is in the online gaming industry is the fact that it constructed mostly from mergers and acquisitions. So as you can see, Playtech has a lot of small companies which it has acquired along the years. It is currently listed on London Stock Exchange as a FTSE 250 company. It has over 6,000 employees in over 15 countries. It works mostly as B2B or B2B2C, meaning we provide a platform to our customers and they provide it to the players. But we also have a few joint ventures which provide our games directly to customers. Even though it's made of several different companies, it's a very unique company. It's an everlasting challenge to make things right, and whenever there's a new company coming in, it's always becoming
muted.
But we'll talk about it also a bit later. And from our point of view, our main objective is to assure a safe, fair, and continuous gaming experience for the players, since they're the focus of the business.
Thank you, Daniel. You mentioned mergers and acquisitions, and this is something that definitely is a major concern for a security department like yours. And speaking about the department, it would be great to hear maybe an overview about the department, the structure of your teams, and how are you really delivering the security in around the corporate?
So basically, I admit we tried a few different, at least one different structure before coming to this. I started in Playtech in the application security team as the team leader. And obviously this is pretty straightforward. But the infrastructure security team has grown from about 6 to 7 people into almost 20 people because of the massive amount of work we have. When you say infrastructure, you can also include network and system, and even you have inside database and cloud, which is not mentioned here, but it's also part of the domain. We try to see if the infrastructure can be separated into production and internal IT. But because there's so many different teams and different ways of working, we still decide to gather the teams around this type of the domain they're working on, such as network and system, rather than with the relevant environments they work with. And as an extension of this, we understood that everything we're doing in terms of security tools would require some kind of monitoring. So 2 years ago, the first security operation analyst was actually brought into Playtech, and currently we have a team that is monitoring 24/7 all the alerts coming in from different locations in the company. And as part of this extension, we also understood that we need to test ourselves as an ongoing basis. We moved from managed services into a small team of offensive security, which is in charge to continuously testing the company's assets. And that's more about the technical side. We have 2 teams which are more, I would say, traditional ones or more procedural ones. The GRC security team is in charge of managing the entire compliance and governance parts. And maybe it is not very known, but the online gaming, and especially the gambling industry, is heavily regulated, and we will discuss about it soon as well. So basically, they're in charge of leading all the security audits coming from the outside and the inside in the company. And the physical security is pretty self-explanatory. They're in charge of making sure that the sites are secured on a physical manner.
Wow, that sounds very comprehensive and complex. So with that, I would like to hear more about the challenges that you have around managing the security around your company, around like all these departments, all the things that are going on in the business.
Sure. So let's start maybe with the first one, which is the technological stack diversity. So can you just give me as an example names of 2 companies, whatever coming into your head, not science?
Okay, let's say Microsoft and Palo Alto.
Okay, great. So take Microsoft, which is working obviously mostly Microsoft based technology, which is mostly Windows, I guess, even though right now it's also Linux, and take Palo Alto, and then try to combine it together as part of a merger or an acquisition state. So obviously, shifting one company into another one will take some time. So in this kind of process, which is sometimes never completed, you have to live with 2 different types of technological stacks, which coexist to some time. And once you have many mergers and acquisition processes, this actually creates a really, really diversified company. So that's an extreme challenge because you also need to adjust the security tools you work with according to the technology and the architecture which is in place. The second challenge is working with our customers. Even though we provide a platform, we also offer it as a single requirement, meaning you don't need anything else. Some licensees choose to take ownership on some of their components in the general architecture. So we have some kind of integrations with them. And then it means that sometimes when you need to change security configurations on your platform, you're sometimes dependent on the customer to make sure that he changes the same configuration as well. Otherwise, the integration can break. And since there's so many different types of integration and there's so many types of services, it's not sometimes very easy to coordinate this or even have visibility.
I see. The thing is, are you aware on time about merger and acquisitions? Like, are you there in the point in time of the company really decide to go for a purchase, to go for this this step?
So there is a due diligence process which is carried out with every new company, and as part of it, there should be compliance and IT and as well as security, which we try to establish what is the security posture of a new company. Obviously, this is not something which is easy to do, especially when you have a given time frame to complete an agreement or a deal. So we try to focus on the highest risk and to have some kind of framework to evaluate the company as a whole, which is sometimes very difficult because there are many times where the company you buy might actually be also made of mergers and acquisition. So again, there's very many details to check across the different sub companies within that company. But we try to do our best, and even in places where we see that things are not up to standards, we always have some kind of a roadmap to assure that all the new companies are aligned or will be aligned at some point to the security standards of Playtech.
So basically you have your kind of checklist, or you have your kind of a portfolio that whenever you purchase a company, you just apply several controls, or how do you really do it? Like,
yes, I mean, it starts with some kind of an audit where we have the checklist, as you say. But then again, there has to be some kind of a plan of shifting into Playtech. So just as an example, if you want to at some point change the identity provider, such as Active Directory, it means you have to guarantee that some measures are being in place on that company's Active Directory, because if you want to switch domains, it means that they will have access to the Playtech domain and they can do the changes over there. So we have to assure that before that, the security controls which we require are implemented. Same goes into firewall management. Same goes into, I would say, system management, such as patching and creating new virtual machines or any kind of machine, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So there are not just the checklists, there are also gates across the path.
Yes, I see. Let's talk a bit about the threat actors that are applicable for a company like Playtech, for a leading gaming platform provider.
So the gambling industry is characterized by high liquidity. So it's all about the money. It's you can say it's some kind of a financial industry, but it attracts so many attack and threat vectors because the immediate impact is withdrawing money from the players. So you don't need to somehow realize your threats, or you don't need to think of how you make them into money. It's just very straightforward. This draws unfortunately a lot of very bad actors in place, and unfortunately you see very often attacks on companies like Playtech and others. So that's a big challenge, and luckily we have the backing up by the management for a big team and the relevant tools, so we're handling this pretty well.
And would you say it's more of the lone wolves, or like criminal syndicates, or are the main actors that are acting against Playtech?
I think if you look on reports of the cyber intelligence companies, you'll see that there are many tech groups which focus on these kind of companies. So usually I would say that there are attempts by individuals, but the most dangerous ones coming from criminal syndicates, and actually sometimes by state operated teams, which is very alarming to us. But we try to keep our awareness up and to make sure that we know all the recent information about the attacks and try to adjust our security posture accordingly.
Mm-hmm. I see. And obviously you have a lot of PII to protect, as a lot of players are interacting with the platform, and also it's something that you consider as one of your challenges here.
Yes. Again, because this is a merger and acquisition company, there are many locations where you might find PII. So that's one challenge, to discover the information. And the second one, since the platform provides B2B, then eventually we keep information of many players. So you can see masses of records in the database which are about the players. And you can see all types of information. You can see social numbers or ID numbers from numerous countries. So this is actually a very big challenge, because you're bound to be under many regulations in that way.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk a bit about the business strategy and versus security. So Daniel, you really operate in the highest echelons of the governance teams of Playtech, and it's really interesting for me to know, like, what is the relationship between business strategy and security? Like, where are you involved in? What place you involved in? You and your team, obviously.
So I think the first item we just discussed about the due diligence process, where we try to evaluate the companies before they are being acquired or merged into Playtech. And again, this is something which influence us in some way, but it's more about how we influence the business. Since we can say if we think this deal is good or not in terms of security, and it will be considered as part of the entire consideration of acquiring the company. So that's actually pretty interesting. I think the second item is actually more interesting, as we see more and more new jurisdictions regulated. More markets are providing new regulation documents. So when you shift from a non-regulated market, for example, into a regulated market, it means that there will be more audits, meaning the GRC needs to increase, and you need to acquire more tools or maybe more licenses of the tool. So it has an operational impact to the security point. Not to mention that it means that you will have more interaction with the regulators in some way. So you need to make sure that you know all the requirements in every regulation, and they differ from one another. So you need to know your analysis very well in that way. On top of that, you don't have only to serve the regulators, but you also need to serve your customers. And they come in and ask for specific SLAs or specific requirements within the contracts. So whenever there's an opportunity for a business, the contract review also goes through security to make sure that we can provide them all the requirements, or if the contract needs to be modified in some way. So again, we are hooking into the business process. And maybe the last part is less about the business specifically to Playtech, but in general about the influence on the security resources in a way, because the industry can go up and can go down, and this industry has seen better and worse days. So the way we plan it is mostly about how the industry is going to be performing, because we understand that it's going to propagate directly into the security budget effects.
Yes, I see. So let's just move one level down, and from the strategy, let's talk more about the operation, the daily operation, the monthly operation, and maybe you can share some information about some recent project you have engaged with.
So in terms of the project, we have endless backlog of security items that we want to improve. I'm pretty sure every Ciso has this kind of items and a never-ending list. If I had to choose the things which might have the biggest effect on the business, it's also exactly represented in the top of the industry in a way. So I can talk about the trend and how we thought it would be it will have the biggest effect to carry on the project. So the application logs is something which is usually overlooked in many security teams. However, specifically in the gaming industry, you sometimes see all databases or all information which is being somehow publicly available, and you can see attackers try to reuse or to check those credentials against all type of gaming companies. So when we see that there is some kind of brute force attack or potential stuffing attack, we want to make sure we identify it on time and block the attempts. So that was first to have visibility to when it happens. And I'm very happy to say that we have this capability right now. Another trend in the industry is starting to think of how to move from the on-premise into cloud. Traditionally, gaming industries were mostly on-premise due to performance. But right now we're seeing the new trend of moving into the cloud, since they want to scale down the expenses on equipment and network and other IT related procurement processes. So it also means we need to, I would say, translate the security controls we have on-premise into the cloud. For example, if you have a vulnerability scanning on-premise, we will probably require the cloud native vulnerability scanning. just as an example. The next one is my favorite, and maybe I'm a bit biased because I'm coming from the application security domain. Application security usually translates into code security. How well does your code measure up against a security review? And the thing is that it also means that the development pipeline is being overlooked. If someone has access to your code repository and your code repository is not hardened or not secured, then it means that whatever you do in your code, whatever you check, is worthless because then someone can change it just after the review. And we started to move forward with the teams to think not only about what they develop, but also on the how. So actually that's very, very interesting. And as I said, the SOC was set up 2 years ago and currently working on maturing the SOC, maturing the processes, increasing the scope into more levels of security monitoring, into more offices and sites. So actually that's very interesting for us.
Yes, and actually our next topic will be speaking about incidents and what is matter in incidents, which really relates to the SOC. But I have another question for you. You mentioned attacks, and you mentioned also other gaming companies. Is there any information sharing between gaming companies? For example, you talking with Cisos or in other gaming companies and sharing information about attacks, about trends, about patterns that you see?
So I think there is a very strong connection between the customers and the platform providers, since they have to work together, and as I said, the integrations are a big part of this. But also between competing companies, like maybe the platform providers or the gaming companies themselves, we can see that there is an information sharing. I can say, for example, in the last month that we reached out to another company which suffered a massive attack over ransomware, just to understand what happened to them so we can also prepare ourselves. And this just shows you that even though there's a big competition, and you can find people to talk with everywhere.
And other initiatives, like personal initiatives, or it is something more organized across the industry?
Currently, I don't think there is an organized security forum for the online gaming industry. I know that there is a World Lottery Association, which has some kind of, I would say, workshops, but I don't think there is like the gambling industry or the online gaming security forum. And actually, that's a pretty good idea. So maybe, you know, maybe tomorrow I'm going to reach out to some people and ask them if it's a good idea to talk about shared challenges.
Sounds good. You can invite us to our panel. So. Talking about incidents, so obviously we can speak about incidents for all day long, but from your perspective, if you can just share, some tips, some really things that really can help companies, things that people should consider while managing their incidents.
Yeah, so actually that's there are many companies that suggest how to prepare you for an incident, or to do some dry exercises and to help you with processes. But there are something which are even beyond security and beyond the professional side. So the first thing is, assuming there's a horrible incident and something really bad happens, this is actually the moment that you know if you're a good manager to your people or a bad manager. Because if the team backs you up and they're willing to stay overtime, and they want to help you, and they're willing to invest, even if it's going to be hard, you know you're doing something right. And whatever you exercise as a manager or as a leader to your people would eventually come back to you in these kind of incidents. Also, having open communication channels. Often we say that there is some kind of reliance on a specific communication channel. So what happens if the attacker comes in and cuts off your entire organization subscription, let's say Teams or Zoom or whatever? So you also need to have some kind of a secondary out-of-band communication to help you reach out to the relevant people. And this is very important because it really can paralyze a company during an incident. And it's so, how I say it, it's so silly that this kind of thing would be the reason why you cannot respond well to an incident. So.
So it's not only to ensure that you really speak to everyone, but really ensure that you actually have this platform to use, because sometimes you don't have it. Sometimes they just cut it off, aren't they?
Completely. I mean, even backing up the mobile numbers of your entire company and put it somewhere else, just in case something, God forbid, happens to the employee database, is something very relevant. Because otherwise, if something happens, then you won't be able to communicate to anyone. Management engagement. I cannot stress enough how much it's important when we want to fix something is wrong on the highest level. When you are in an incident, you sometimes need more resources, you sometimes need an external company to come in, you sometimes need to get the attention of some people, and if you don't have the management to back you up during this time so you can grab their attention, it will be very difficult to manage this as a very quick response in a way. So I would say the management engagement is something that should be agreed upon way before any kind of incident comes in. And I think the last part is maybe the roughest part in a way. During an incident, everything's going to be messy. You'll have lists in SharePoint and in Slack and in chat and in email and wherever. And eventually the flow of the incidents is maybe you will have it in your mind and you have some memory of what happens, but as long as the incident proceeds, it's very hard to track which items you asked IT to do, security to do, DevOps to do, and were they completed in all the sites in case it's a configuration which is global, for example. So having a very well tracking is something which you would need to have in place that way.
Yes.
So no, sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned the management engagement. So how would you engage in management? Because sometimes the management is not so supportive for security. So what would you do in order to really make them and kind of support you and make things better?
Well, you have a smart way and an effective way. So the smart way is to try to convince them to do a tabletop exercise and to see how they react to suddenly there's an issue going on or something else. So that's one thing. And as you said, it's something very hard to get them engaged. The effective way, which is not smart, unfortunately, is to try and send them some kind of alert of, oh my God, something horrible happened. Obviously not a real incident, but then to see how they react. It's again for very specific type of managers. If you have some kind of trust between you and them, I got to do it once with the right people, and it was really great because they were engaged. And eventually, after this exercise, I tried to explain to them what we tried to accomplish, and they said, "Okay, now we understand." But if you do it with the wrong type of people, you might get yourself a day after without any kind of work. So you need to be smart.
And you don't like to be there, yeah. So no matter what will be the management support, there is a matter of budget. And sometimes CISOs just feel that the budget is really not enough. So if you can give us some tips about budget utilization and what can you do in order to get more with what you have.
Yeah, so resource limitation is a big topic right now, mostly because of the Corona crisis, and obviously it's going to affect many companies. So trying to have in mind how you can move into lower costs. So first of all, using open resource tools, the security community is very active in terms of engineering. So whatever you need, there is a very good opportunity or probability that you'll find something outside, which is maybe not great as a commercial tool, but will also give you some kind of value. So that's the first step to see what you can outsource into open resources, I would say. Grooming security champions. This is mostly about the headcount issue, where you try to delegate some of your responsibilities into other teams to help you. Also, sometimes you are not able to scale up, so you try to convince different R&D teams or IT teams to assign you some of your time to help you with tasks. The last one is actually more strategic, where you can, if you are unfortunate and you have to cut back some of your projects, always having a visibility to priorities or what's more important than the other will help you to take those decisions much faster. I must say that we had this kind of dilemma a few months back, and after we did some exercise, it really helped us to focus on the most important things, and even the even though there are risks that we do not address, we know that they're less important than what we do now. And the last part is mostly, again, for, I would say, complex companies or mergers and acquisition companies to try and consolidate different vendors doing the same thing into a single vendor, which would help you reduce cost and enjoy the, I would say, to get better prices just because you have more licenses in a way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So thank you so much, Daniel. As for now, we're finished with the professional part and with the tips for other CISOs, other
Unmuted.
IT professionals. And it will really be nice to know, because also we have a lot of students engaged with us and people in different levels in their career, and people really wondering what is the path for a techie, what is the path of a security engineer, of an IT engineer to become a leader in the industry, to become a security leader and IT leader, to become a CTO, a CISO. So if you can share maybe some things from your experience.
Sure. So I started off 15 years ago as a junior consultant and just climbed my way up. And I want to try to think what would be the best advice I can give. Then it's always about being proactive or to show something outside. So the first thing is to be more involved, meaning that as long as you try to only care about the things which are in your domain and not to ask about what other people do or about what type of other parts your work influence on, then you will never be able to move forward because it shows you don't have any kind of, I would say, motivation to move forward. So that's a key item in moving up, I would say. The second thing, and that's specifically about moving from technical to more managerial part, is not to think about how you build something or how you do something. Is about the why and the what. So if you look at the what, which is like the big plan of the team or the group, and try to think why we're doing this and not those tasks, or why we're doing this and how does this blend into the company's goals or the business goals, it will help you to become more visible to how the company operates, for example. Number 3 is pure marketing. This is something which was very hard for me to be proud of achievements. Unfortunately, you will always have to market yourself in a way. You will always compete with others on very good positions. So you need to show what you've done. You need to basically wear your badge on your sleeve and show, this is who I am. So I think it's something that people forget or something they underestimate themselves. So be proud of who you are in a way. The last thing is when you climb up, you have more responsibilities, meaning you will be in charge of more things, more people, and it means you also need to assure that whatever happens underneath you, whether it's people, tasks, processes, whatever, if something doesn't happen, eventually you'll be held accountable. So you need to make sure things happen within your group, and you have a really strong sense of responsibility.
Amazing, Daniel. So let's keep with that and maybe give your fellow CISOs some tips from your own perspective.
Mm-hmm. So I will actually start with the last one. Taking time off is something that security feel you're not, I would say, entitled to, because there's always something, there's always an incident, and people just forget sometimes to switch off and take some vacation. So the first thing I would say is to avoid the burnout, because we really do see this in in the industry of security executives. The first item, going back, you have to protect your team from people, because security has a very difficult position in always telling people that they've done something wrong or to ask them to do something. So you need to back them up in a way. But still, you don't want to be, in the face of the other teams when you tell them what to do or you advise them how to operate. So you will need to find a way to balance between keeping your team and pushing people to do what you need in a way, which is very tricky. Be involved, even if you're the most technical person and all the security technologies and everything. If you don't know the business, if you don't know what's important for the managers and how to implement those technologies within the company, you'll never succeed, to be honest. And eventually, when you talk with the management and you need to tell which budget you need, how many people, what have you done this year, you always need to provide some kind of facts on why you chose those things. Risk is already pretty abstract because it's very hard to quantify it. I mean, there are many frameworks, but eventually it's some kind of decision by the person who's evaluating the risk. So you need to stick to the facts as much as possible. And in many cases, people just forget to do it.
Yes, an evidence-based approach, actually.
Exactly.
So, Daniel, thank you so much. I enjoyed this session very much. I learned a lot. And yes, so that was our session, first session with Daniel Liber, Ciso of Playtech. And thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to coming back here again.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That was excellent. See you again another time.